Good morning. My name is Mike, for those of you who have forgotten. It's great to be back. It's great to be away, but it's also great to be back. Today is actually sort of the midpoint of summer. Now, I know it already feels like it's over, because if you go into Target, it's like back to school stuff and school supplies, and I know some of your kids have already started back, and all the different things that go on. But it's actually the midpoint of our summer, and Julie and I were talking, my wife and I were talking. We have missed 4 Sundays. We were gone for 3, and then last week was the summer Sabbath, and that is the most Sundays that I have missed in a row in my entire life. And what's really interesting is I still feel very connected. We were able to do some things and participate in some ways that didn't feel the same. I was very disciplined while I was on vacation. I didn't call Richie, our executive pastor. I try not to bother him all the time, but especially, I'm not going to call him. So I talked to him like once, and we just talked about like just normal stuff. And so it was just a lot of refreshment, a lot of things that were just really good to be away, to vacation, to tinker with some things, which is always fun, to tinker and to kind of think about what could be and how things could be. And so I just want to remind us, because what we've been doing this summer is so profound. I don't want us to just rush ahead into the fall, because what's going to happen in the next 6 to 8 weeks is the rhythm is going to get back to what it was before it was so drastically disrupted in the summer. And your schedule is just gonna fill up with all the things. It's just gonna happen. And before you know it, 6 weeks in, you're gonna be up to your eyeballs with homework, and you're gonna be up to your eyeballs with all the things that you've committed to and running from here. And this is the whole point of the summer Sabbath, is to go, are there some habits and disciplines and ways to arrange our lives that we need to be more intentional about for the sake of the kind of people we want to become, and maybe more importantly, for the kind of people that God has called us to become, and the kind of people that bring something to the world that it desperately needs. So this is really, really intricately connected into how we do this. So I want you to do 2 things. I want you to get your Bible out, if you have it. I want you to get your phone out, like for real. Now, my phone is dead, so I got my iPad. So I'm gonna be like the guy taking videos at the soccer games with the iPad, right? How cool pastors use iPads for their messages, but I'm like the cool person who uses mine for the photos and stuff like that. So the reason I want you to do this, and I'm dead serious, there's a website that you can go to, and I want you to go to it right now if you have your phone, your iPad. It's fortcity.church. /reflect. If you're in this room, you can actually just click the QR code where it says connect, and that'll take you right to the website. So last week we had summer Sabbath. It was kind of the marking point for this particular season that we're doing together. And part of, and we're serious about this, because it's a novel idea, and we were kind of joking like, well, some people just, didn't come into church last week because they just forgot. They don't come anyway, and they just forgot it was summer Sabbath. They didn't do anything about it. They just weren't here anyway. And some of you perhaps did show up, and then you remembered it was summer Sabbath. And then some of you probably took various positions in terms of making it a part of a routine or whatever. And so we actually want your feedback on it. And it's not to make you feel guilty. Part of the challenge of the church going forward is that we have to find ways together how we're going to connect to what's happening in our church. What's happening in the church that I belong to, what's happening in the church that you're belong to and you're part in. And this isn't about making you feel guilty about not coming on Sundays. Right? This is like, I missed 4 weeks, right? And I was able to feel connected. I watched Carson his 2 weeks, and I watched Laura Lynn and Clay, and I did the devotions, and I kept my quiet time, and I participated in summer Sabbath. I used the resources. I tried to just participate in our church in a normal way, and it really did do some things in me that were surprising. I'm gonna share this with you. So we wanna be able to get your experience as well. This is really important. If you are here, right, so if you pull your phone out, it just has a question. We're gonna do this together. How did you participate in the Sabbath this year? You click it down, and And it says, I spent the entire day on July 9th practicing a Sabbath. I took part of the day practicing a Sabbath. I didn't participate in the Sabbath this year. Yep, totally forgot about it. I don't want you to feel guilty. I want you to go, because if you forgot about it, like we're gonna take that seriously on us to make sure that we do a better job of helping people participate and connect in the church that you care about. So that's the heart behind this. Now, I actually participated the entire day. So if you did that, it gives you some more questions. How was the Sabbath day for you? It was amazing, it was helpful, it was a little bit challenging, but I learned a lot. It was amazing, it was helpful, but I'm gonna say it was a little bit challenging, but I learned a lot. Because there was a tension that I could feel during the day. Now, Sunday's normally a work day for me, so this was very different for me. And there were a couple of things that I learned that were profound, and I'll share them with you. How much did you prepare for the Sabbath day? Dude, I prepared a ton. So mark that down if you did. If you didn't, then whatever, right? And we really want your feedback. So I'm doing this. Y'all are doing this? Are y'all playing along? Okay, thank you. I have a lot of fun up here by myself, but it's a whole lot nicer when we do this together. How can we make Sabbath better next time? I'm gonna say, because I was kind of involved, I'm gonna say just hit repeat, but if there's something that you think, hey, we could have made it easier or better for you to participate, we would love that information. There's some other stuff you can give us. Your name and email's optional, and then I'm gonna hit submit, and we're done. So let me tell you what I did. And I'll take a selfie of us while we're up here. I'm just kidding. There were some things that were helpful to me that I did not realize. So one is, and I don't love chores at all. I don't enjoy maintenance much at all. So cutting grass, weed eating, those kind of things just feel like drudgery to me. But what we had decided we were gonna do is we were gonna do some things in our backyard. We were gonna have our kids over. We were gonna celebrate Sabbath together. So Clay had made his list of things that he was gonna do on summer Sabbath, on Sabbath Sunday, and I did this kind of the same thing. And mine looked like I was gonna get up and read and spend some time with the Lord. We were gonna have breakfast together, and one of my goals was to take a nap in my pool, which I did. And I woke up early on the Sabbath, or Saturday, I woke up early, and I cut the grass, and I weed-eated, and we went to the grocery store, and I normally hate these things. And I'm like out there with my, I'm having like, I can't, the lines, I'm enjoying the lines in my lawn. I never like this stuff. And I did that, and we went to the grocery store, and we got all the stuff ready to make Christmas casserole, because we thought that was a great way to do this, right? Like a Christmas casserole on Sabbath morning, so we could get up and you just throw it in the oven. Everybody comes over and just takes their, so we prepared all this on Saturday. What I began to notice as we enjoyed this, kind of reflecting back, that it changed the way I did all these chores. Normally I'm like, oh my God, I gotta cut the grass. Oh my God, I gotta do this. Oh my God. And it was like, no, there was vision to it. We were prepping for something. And then even on Sunday, as we were sitting there and we were just kind of chatting and kind of finishing up some things, we were talking about, we got to go to the store. We want to go to the store and get one more thing because we were going to do something that afternoon. We're like, the stores are closed because it's a holiday. Like it felt like everybody was doing this. Did anybody else have that experience or just me? God. All right. That's what was so profound. The other thing that was really interesting to me is a lot of times when I'm away on Sundays, the responsibility of this just gets dumped on somebody else. Which I'm grateful for, and there's a lot of people who do a great job. But one of the things that I felt was a sense of relief that I wasn't doing this and it didn't burden anybody else. And it helped me to think about some things that I carry and how I carry them differently and how I allow other people to carry them for me. Because part of what this is about, right? Carson said this in his message, that what we do habitually determines how we experience God relationally. And so we really want for your input and your participation and how this was helpful or how we can make it more helpful to you. Because if the scriptures, and they do give us guidance in how we are to arrange our lives in order to experience and to participate in the way that God has called us to, right? It's important for us then to figure out how to arrange our time and to develop some disciplines around this. For me, I've been working on this for a long time, not only to prevent burnout, because anybody who works in a job where there's just a lot of people demand or demand in general, burnout is a real option. If you don't organize and arrange your life, right, it's likely to happen. Your mental health, your capacity to enjoy the things that you have and other people just goes down. But I also needed to learn how to live in dependence, to trust God's provision. Because what I'm often prone to do is to say, God, I want to trust you for provision, but I really need my little nest egg. I really need a little control over here to make sure that I have what I need when I need it. You do a pretty good job, but I think I could do this better. And to take a day and to just depend on him is to arrange our lives to live in dependence of his provision without constantly trying to take back control. And the scriptures tell us to do this at least once a week. So one of the things that we're talking about this summer is this idea of delight. And these are two things that are going to be connected. I'm going to try to do this in the time that we have here this morning. But this idea of delight that we've been talking about this whole summer, to delight yourself in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. And the question that I've been asking is, can our desires be formed? What say do you have in what you want? Do you just want the heart wants what the heart wants? That's the dumbest advice you could ever give to somebody. Because the heart wants all sorts of things that it shouldn't want, and they're gonna be harmful to itself and to others. And the question that you've got, and you have to consider this deeply, is can I, right? Can we do things, and more importantly, can we put ourselves in a position where God does things that actually shapes desires of our heart, so that we want things that are consistent with the life that he's created us to live. The theme from our Fuse Camp, and we just got back from Fuse Camp, all of our high school, middle school students, and I think if I heard Jeff correctly, and I've heard that the theme was that basically God is using his people to write his story. So if you're a high school or middle school student, you went to Fuse, this might be a passage for you, Isaiah 58, for you to just land on for a while. Tomorrow, our kids are going, our 3rd through 5th graders, so when I got my bracelet right here, I'd be praying for this generation of elementary school students heading over. I've spent a lot of time over the last probably year in Isaiah, and particularly in a few places there, Isaiah 65 and Isaiah 58. And Isaiah 58 really talks about this idea of God giving us commands and instructions, and then us taking those instructions and using them to make our lives work better. I know none of us would ever think of doing that. But it's like we take these blessings or promises of God and we say, now we can use them, and we use them to make our lives work better, to make sure that we get what we want when we want it. This is the indictment, Isaiah 50. So I want to read this to you in a larger context, and then we'll kind of mine down on the implication of this idea right here and what it means for this right here, for our desires. Isaiah 58, it begins with this request of God's people, an indictment of God's people. Day after day, verse 2, God's people seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right and that has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions, and they seem eager for God to come near to them. While we have fasted, they say, and have you not seen it? We have humbled ourselves, and have you not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please, and you exploit all the workers. And your fasting ends with quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fasting that I've chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves. It is only a day for bowing one's head like a reed, or for lying in sackcloth and ashes. Is this what you call a fast, an acceptable day of the Lord? And he's just asking them to assess. You're using these things for your own advantage, and you're harming other people. This creates competition. It creates all sorts of things that are problematic. So this is not what I've asked. And then he gives this vision, this God's vision, and our responsibility in it. Listen to this. Is this not the kind of fasting that I've chosen? To loose the chains of injustice, to untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free, to break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry, to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will come quickly. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You'll cry for help, and he'll say, here I am. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, I want to underline that one. If you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness and your night will become like the noonday. And the Lord will guide you in his ways. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land with strength to your frame. You'll be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins, and you will raise up the age-old foundations. You'll be called a repairer of the broken walls, a restorer of the streets with dwellings. This is a vision of redemption and what God's people are to be about. And we posture ourselves before him to draw from him vision and strength and to trust. And then out of that comes something, he says, you will be like a well-watered garden in a sun-scorched land. That you will be called a repairer of the breach, that the work of our hands, the contribution of our lives will serve to reconcile things and return things to the way God has intended them to be. This is God's vision for the world in which we live, and this is our responsibility in it. In whatever we choose to do, and whatever we do with our lives, it's always to be towards this. And then he adds this is in verse 13. If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath and from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's day honorable, and if you honor it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, if you arrange your life in order to do some things, right? What's the result of this? Look at this next verse in verse 14. It says, then you'll find what? Your joy where? In the Lord. So this isn't just about going, I'm gonna just like join the Lord. Like there's a posture to discovering this. When I began to wrestle with this, there were a couple of things that I noticed, some observations. I want to make them for us. There is a declaration in this. And the declaration is, starting in verse 13, it says, if you call the Sabbath what? A delight. If you just wake up and say, today is a delight. Like that's what it's talking about. If you call the Sabbath a delight. And if you make it or acknowledge it as honorable. The way I would think of this is if you sort of confess that this is worth your time. A lot of us who are addicted to productivity and drive and forward motion and building things feel like that if we are not productive or if something isn't producing or moving something in a direction, that it's futile or it's a waste of time. And so to sit and delight in the Lord and just to let this sort of space be sufficient is very hard when we're used to making things happen. And you have to just acknowledge it and say, God, I confess that this time when I'm resting and not producing anything, it's valuable time. It is time well spent. Like to convince yourself that when you aren't making things happen, it is a tremendously valuable use of your time. That's a hard thing for some of us to get. The second thing is, right, this is not only a declaration, but it's also a surrender. And this is hard. That he says, you're not gonna just do what you wanna do. There's a surrendering of your will. Like on this day, in this space, in this moment, we're gonna talk about this in a minute, but just say in this allotment of time, I'm not gonna just do what I want to do. I'm gonna surrender my will. I'm not gonna do the things that I want to. I'm not just gonna go in I'm not gonna use this as a part of my normal daily patterns, but I'm gonna surrender my way to God. I'm actually gonna do something different. And he says, if we don't just use idle words, if we don't just fill up our time with blah, 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 blah. And some of this, right, it's idle words is about stewarding your voice. The things that we say to other people, the things that we post on social media, the comments that we make on other people's posts. These are all things that need to sort of come underneath some kind of submission, of surrender. And so this is all a part of us learning how to do this. Now, there are a couple of things I want to make notice because there's a cycle of this. And if there's a connection here. And what he says is, if you call this a delight, if you start off and you call this a delight, you declare it to be so, then something is gonna happen in you. You're going to find or discover there's something that you received that you actually wanted, that you weren't maybe sure you wanted in the beginning. And when I think of this, there's two kinds of delight. Number one is a passive delight. And this is just like the stuff that catches us. There's all kinds of passive delight, right? Duke basketball, you just, so awesome, right? You can't help yourself. Or Carolina or whoever you happen to like, whatever, you get the idea. You don't have to work at it. They're just things that are great and beautiful that just, that's awesome. And let me ask you a question. Most of the things that just catch your eye, make you go, whew, that's awesome. Are they good for your soul? Or do they tend to take us in directions that aren't always helpful? Let me just tell you, most of the stuff that's in front of us on a regular basis is not helpful, but it is delightful. It's passive, and a lot of us just assume that delight should be easy. That you should just go, that's awesome, and everybody should know it's awesome, you should do that. But there are all sorts of things that take a lot of work to delight in. The relationships that I have that are cherished, right? They're not passive. They may have started in some way that way, but they take a lot of work. It's this idea that we, because what happens to us, we think that if something doesn't instinctively get our joy, or if we don't instinctively enjoy it, then we probably shouldn't be spending any time on it. We live in a way where when it doesn't immediately delight us, or when it stops delighting us, we just move on to something else. And this is true in the products we use. It's true for a lot of us in the relationships that we have or the jobs that we keep. Because it's just moving from one thing to the next to kind of enter. And the churches we attend. So as soon as it's no longer delightful, you're like, I'll go find another one. It's not that it's deep, it's just new. And we're enticed by new things. And what we need is to learn how to develop delight where we are and in the things that God is doing in us. And this is the psalm that is framed this summer for us, right? Psalm 37:4. Delight yourself in the Lord. Delight yourself in the Lord. It starts here. And what's the surprise ending? That he'll do what? You'll find something. You'll find the desires of your heart. A lot of us start here and then we ask, hey, God, can you help us delight? And it's like, no, we delight ourselves in this. If you carve out some time and you don't go your own way and you surrender your will and you zip it for just a little bit, you will find joy in the Lord. If you call this time a delight, you're probably going to begin to discover some things about this. And this is the whole point. I mean, one of the core tenets of my life comes out of Psalm chapter 119, verse 5, and it's a cry, oh, that my ways would be established in order to keep your word. I read this as a college student. I just remember oh, that my ways would be established. It means like this, I can't be passive in this. And it's not just about being active. It's not about active delight. It's about proactive delight. Proactive delight requires something from you. Do you love to read? The answer is probably, do you love to run? Right, same thing. I remember I experimented with this. I ran I don't run anymore, but I ran for a long time. And I ran for about a year. And then I discovered that, oh my gosh, I love to run. It took a whole lot of things happening to get those places. There are a lot of disciplines in my life that I didn't start off loving. In fact, they were drudgery. But over time, as I began to confess them, this is a delight. It requires something from me. And in that, I began to find something about it. Most of the things that are most meaningful to me are disciplines that I have developed that did not begin as, oh, I just want to do this. They began as, man, this is really hard. And I've got to really carve out time. And I've got to really be intentional. And sometimes this is the last thing that I want to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. And over time, you begin to find these patterns and these practices that you can't live without. I'm going to be working hard on creating better Sabbath rhythms in my life. I got good rhythms, I mean, there were some things about the preparation that I learned that I'm gonna try to put into place into my life. There's this cycle, right, of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. If you chase this, looking for this, you're probably gonna be in an endless pursuit. And this is always going to be different because at some point this is gonna run out. They call it the 7-year itch in a marriage for a reason. This is true in almost everything that we do. And it's pushing through those places and those places to find, and you begin by calling something a light and then find that our desires are formed and adjusted to this. We are to delight ourselves in the Lord. And this is a beautiful verse, but it's also a call or a call to us that we're to find joy and to take pleasure in the Lord. And this requires us to surrender some things about ourselves. And I want to say this very carefully, but to delight, to confess or to proclaim that something is beautiful and good and delightful acts as a formative agent on your desires. That you can actually confess this, I delight myself in the Lord, and find it to be true, even if it's not in your first attempt at it. It acts as a formative desire that what we worship and what we love further forms what we worship and we love. You set your eyes on something and you fall in love with it and you pursue it, it's going to create more and more and more desire for it. That's how addictions work. It forms us. So this call to delight ourselves in the Lord and he'll give us desires of our heart is not just a nice platitude, it's actually a life-saving, life-giving invitation. For you to find a sufficiency in something that can actually support the weight of desire, of human desire. And then everything else begins to flow from this. This is almost exactly what Jesus said, right in the middle of Matthew chapter 6. This, Carson talked about this a couple weeks ago. Jesus says that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. When you begin to establish what it is that you delight in, you're going to tell your heart to follow. It's the formation of desire. This is a powerful idea. A couple of things as I want to give you your kind of homework. Two ideas that have been kind of with me for a long time, and these are kind of shaping for me. One's like a gentle reminder, the other is a very sobering thought or idea, warning. Ephesians chapter 1, and it's Paul's praying for this flock, this group of Christ followers that are under his care. And he writes this, and you'll read this, and you'll go, this is a cool verse, right? He says, I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which God has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance, the riches of the glorious inheritance of his people, and his incomparably great power for those of us who believe. Do you notice a metaphor in there at the very beginning? What is Paul praying for at the very beginning? Praying for what? The eyes, say it loud. The eyes of our heart. Do you have eyes in your heart? Of course not. So what is he talking about? Like, do you ever just stop and think? This is why the scriptures are given to us in this way, to make us think and to enter into it. What he is saying, this is an obvious metaphor, right? He's praying that I will be awakened to sense more than just what I see. That's what he's asking. That somehow what simply catches my eye may not tell the whole story, that whatever I'm inclined to pursue or to gaze at or to want doesn't tell the whole story. What I actually see and encounter needs to be something more and something deeper than just whatever happens to catch my attention. And in fact, I need to see him more intentionally and with more depth. I need to learn how to do this. I need for my faith. We walk by faith and not by sight. That's the point. I have to run all these things that garner my attention or that entice my attention through another filter to help me see, Lord, what am I going to be willing to call good and delightful? You will either pay the price for your attention in learning to discipline your eyes, or you run the risk of malforming your heart. everything that we see is grabbing and pulling and ultimately shaping and forming. For those of you who are like 19, 20, 17, 16, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok have become the mentor of an entire generation. Whatever catches your attention is ultimately gonna get your affection. That what you love and what you want further forms what you love and what you will want. Pay very careful attention to what you call good. This is Jesus' sobering warning. He says in Matthew 6:33, but if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. And if the light that is within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? We talked about this, that what catches your attention is soon going to grab a hold of your heart. And if you think what you are seeing is good and it's not, it will ruin your soul. This is what we have to sort of get to understand, right? This is the surrendering perspective, the surrendering of our perspective that has a corresponding call to us to declare or to say this is good. So here's what I want you to do. This is what the Sabbath is about, and treating the summer as a Sabbath and taking space. I want you to consider this, and we're gonna talk about this in a few weeks. But I want you to consider what your fall is gonna be like and how you're gonna arrange your life, how you're gonna arrange your time to make sure that you give your attention to things that can hold the weight of your desire. That's what we're gonna be talking about. So this is why, or what I've learned in my own personal discipline of doing a quiet time and reading my Bible. It's interesting, I've learned so much about the scriptures in the last 10 years in so many new ways. And it has changed the way I read. It's just taken a long time, but I've stuck with it. And so when you talk about arranging your time, there are two things that I want to mention to you. Number one is you have to put these things, and we call them spiritual disciplines or spiritual practices, the practice of these things, doing them, actually doing them. That's what a practice is. But it's not just so you can check off a box, because the second part of this is what you experience. In our sort of culture, we practice because we know that practice makes what? Right, not in this case. This is why some of us have given up, because you think if I practice reading my Bible, if I practice prayer, I'll be perfect at it. And it's still hard and it's still weird and you still don't understand, you still have questions, go, what in the world is happening? The point of a practice, of a spiritual practice, is not perfection, it's ordering. It's to reorder, it's to orient yourself to a way of life, to have the eyes of your heart open for just a moment and be aware that the things that you are most naturally gonna see and most easily gonna see may not be the most important things that you need to see for the sake of your soul. Like, that's gonna be the challenge. And so what I would say to this is actually really, really simple. Is number one is you need to, it may be a Sabbath day, it may be a Sabbath space, it may be a quiet time in the morning, it may be 2 hours or 3 hours in a week, it may be whatever you have to do, but number one is you have to pick a time to arrange your life in order to keep God's word. You have to make time in your life to do it. So pick a time. I have learned over the course of my life that there are different times for different seasons. When my kids were small, it was sometimes only early in the morning or only late at night or only a lunch. Right, there were seasons when I didn't have any lunch appointments. I went by myself to get this kind of time. But you have to pick a time. And now we're empty nesters. I have nothing else to do. But I use the mornings. I've come to love the mornings. Pick a time. Pick a place. This is not hard to do. Pick a place. For 20 plus years, I went to the same coffee shop. Then they closed, made me mad. I threw off my whole groove. I prepare. In the summer, I was on vacation. I found a place on our vacation where I could go in the morning, and I just picked a new place for that little window of time. At my house, I use my back porch. Here, I have a couple of places I go around the building, but I have a place. Pick a place. If you've never done this, just pick one and commit to using it for like 6 weeks or something like that, or maybe just the rest of the summer. But pick a place. Number 3 is declare it good. To start off and say, Lord, this moment, this time is a delight. If we call the Sabbath a delight and we consider it honorable and we don't go our own way and we don't do the things we please and we don't use idle words, we will find joy in the Lord. We will delight ourselves in the Lord, and he will give us the desires of our heart. Declare it good. This is the practice. You do these things. You're gonna do it one day, it's gonna feel great. You're gonna do it the next day, it's gonna feel like, oh my gosh, or you're gonna forget for 3 days in a row. You're gonna think, I'm no good at this, I'm never gonna, I'll just start over next year. It's like, no. We're practicing. It's about just doing what's in front of you as it's in front of you. It's not perfect. It's not the goal. You're reorienting. And the second part is to experience. What you do is you actually record or you consider what is happening. What are you experiencing? We read the Bible and go, I don't understand. I'm not doing this right. You know what you're experiencing? You're experiencing that you don't understand. And what do you do when you don't understand? God, could you help me? Or you ask someone that you trust, or you begin to process. It's about your experience. You're reordering yourself. You're reordering your world and your view to what God wants us to see, what he invites us to see, to open the eyes of our hearts. Pick a time, pick a place, declare it good, and record your experience. Write it down. Talk about it with somebody that you trust, okay? We have a ton of ways to do this. We have devotions on our website 5 days a week. We have the resources for the summer Sabbath. I spent time reflecting on Psalm 145 just as we were asked to do. You can use Isaiah 58 and say, Lord, could you give me vision for what I might offer to the world around you? It is all right there. This is how we begin to learn. To say, God, we're gonna call this a delight. I'm gonna trust that as I do that, you're gonna awaken things in me that bring me the kind of life that I long for most deeply. If we delight ourselves in the Lord, he will give you the desires of your heart. So let's arrange our lives to experience that reality. Sound good? Father, would you help us? Would you meet us? Use the relationships that we have. Use our parents, our kids, our small groups, our team members, people that we trust, to just remind us to pick a time, pick a place, to practice seeing and allowing you to help us see, to open the eyes of our heart that we might behold the richness of the inheritance that you have given to us and the great power that you've made available to those of us who trust you. You're so faithful to form us in our character. God, would you be faithful in forming the longings, the wants, and the desires of our very souls. Father, thank you for your faithfulness. I ask you would help us to put these things into practice, to reorder and experience the life you've made available to us, and the life that you long for us to live. And I ask all this in your Son, Jesus, who is our King. Amen.